What could be more classically winter than a snowman? Hey, I'm Miss Jess, and today we are going to paint a snowman. But this snowman is not going to be an ordinary snowman, and it's not going to be 3 circles stacked one on top of the other like you normally would think of when you think of painting a snowman. Oh no, we're going to flip the perspective for this one, and we're going to paint a bird's eye view of a snowman looking up to the sky. If you're ready, then grab your paints, grab some brushes, and let's go. For this project, I'm going to use mixed media paper. You want a paper that works for wet or dry because we are going to use paint. Okay, you could also use a canvas. So I've got my piece pulled out there. We're going to use acrylic paint. It's fine if it comes in a tube or a tub or whatever it is, as long as it's acrylic paint. You can mix and match, and you'll need something to mix paint on. I'm just going to use this plate. Blue and white are going to be our main colors here. We'll need quite a bit of it, but I always try to put on less than I think I need because I don't want to waste any. So I'm going to put some blue and some white separately. That's probably more blue than I need, but I have 2 cups of water so that I'm just prepared in case I need to. And we're going to start with a larger brush. You can use whatever style brush you have. I really don't get too picky about brushes, but I like to say use what you've got, right? If yours looks a little different, that's okay. Get that brush just a little bit wet. We don't want it to be super wet. We're not working with watercolor paint. We don't need water to activate the paint. It can go on just as it is. Your acrylic paint might be thinner or thicker. You can see my white is actually thicker than my blue. They're different brands, but that is totally fine. First thing we're going to do, though, is on our surface, let's get some blue and just throw it on there. We're just putting this all over. Get some white and throw it right on the top. So we're just making random dots at this point, and then we're going to go back and forth, making sort of like X's or random little back and forth movements. And we're going to mix it together. Now, if you see it starts to look kind of like a crayon kind of drying out, then add just a little bit of water to the brush. Get a bit more of both paints and mix that in. Now, the reason we're using the 2 different colors, not pre-mixing them, is because we actually want this to look a little bit more random and like there's more color, not just one solid mixed color, but a variety of colors. So adding more and spreading this out. Now I'm already seeing that I actually think I need more paint. What do you know? I didn't have enough. All right, let me get some more. I'm always worried that I'll have too much, but that's okay. Let's get some more. I'm trying to work somewhat quickly with these colors because I want to be able to fill the whole page with color before you can really see the dry lines. So working with this kind of paint, it's really good to try to work with wet lines before they dry. Otherwise you can kind of see it because when it dries, acrylic paint is sort of plasticky. So you can see the edge where it dries. Although making these brush strokes back and forth like this helps to hide some of those lines that dry, because by flicking the paint back and forth, we're sort of making it have a tapered edge where it is feathering off at the end, and so it's not going to be such a harsh line when it dries. Adding a little bit of water, but not too much, remember. Now, if yours looks different than mine, is a lighter color, darker color, that's okay. I'm trying to make sure it's not too dark because this is actually supposed to be a cool toned layer of snow, but I don't want it to be white. I want it to be very blue because we're going to put a white snowman on it. Adding some white. Okay, awesome. This looks great. Now I'm going to adjust my light a little bit just so that you can see without the light picking up. You can see where the wet paint is reflecting a little bit with the light, but you can see a nice varied background. Once you've got the whole paper covered with some color that looks nice and mixed up, then let that dry for a little bit. You can see how mine is not even. There's some spots that look more white, some that look more dark blue. There's just a lot of variety. That's going to add a lot of visual interest to the painting. So that is great. You can see some brush strokes. That is an awesome first layer. Yours will probably look different because every single piece is unique and every artist is unique. So if yours looks different, that is great. Now while we let this dry, go ahead and wash out that brush that you used. It's very important to wash out acrylic paint as soon as you can. You can use cold water to wash all that paint out. Try to wash it and rinse it very, very thoroughly until the water runs clear and the brush is nice and clean. If you wait too long, this kind of paint will start to stick to each little fiber of the brush, and then it's very difficult to remove later. So let's go wash up. Welcome back. We've got our background nice and dry. I'm going to add a bit more white paint over here, just pure white, because we are going to start to make our snowman. Awesome. We want a brush that is pretty big. We're going to make our snowman right in the middle, and we want just a little bit of water also, just to make it nice and movable. Just using the white here. What we're going to do is make 3 circles. So we want one of them to be big, a little bit more water here to make this a little bit more movable. Nice big circle. And it does not need to be perfect. All right, but just go round and round. It's okay if it's a little bit lumpy. We're just doing the outline right now, so nice big one, and then another one a little bit on the inside of it, so sort of looks like a donut a little bit. Just added a little more water so that I can smoothly make that line. Okay, great. And then adding a little more water to my brush, getting a bit more of that white paint. I'm going to make one more. Now this one in the middle is going to be the head. Now let's color that whole thing in white. All right, just the middle one. You can see that the head might look bigger than you would expect, because when you think of a snowman, you think, oh, the head on top is much smaller than the middle, and the middle is much smaller than the bottom, right? They're built with big, medium, small. Well, when you look at something from a different perspective, then the proportions look different. all right? So when you're looking at the snowman from above, then his head is actually closer to your view and it'll look a little bit bigger. Just like how if I take my two hands and I put one on top of the other, this hand looks bigger than this hand, doesn't it? They're really the same size. All right, I'm getting a bit more of my white just to define that head. Now, we don't want to leave the middles of the other circles just plain like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bit of blue into the white. Need a bit more white here too. We're going to add a little bit of a shadow. Let's see here, a bit of a shadow. Oh, that's a bit too much of a shadow. I've got too much blue. Let's get some more white. Okay, great. Now what I'm doing is going around the biggest one with a dotting technique, making sure that the color is a little bit shaded with blue, but it's lighter than the outside, right? So the outside we want to be darker than this biggest circle, but we want the biggest circle to be darker than the head. So that's why we've added a little bit of shadow to it. We're just giving it a little bit of depth. The dotting that we're doing is just providing some snow texture. Okay, we'll go all the way around until we reach that middle circle. Okay, so now it really kind of looks like a donut with a donut hole floating in the middle, or maybe it looks like a bagel. I don't know. What do you think? Okay. If we need to define any of the edges, if they've been lost, then add a little bit more white to them. Okay, very cool. This looks a little too stripey over here, so just going to break that up a little. Well, I'm really digging that. Okay, going to add a bit more of this blue around. Oh, so cool. Okay, I like that. I like that a lot. Now, the middle section, we want to define that a little bit. So what we're going to do is take a bit of that blue. So I'm taking whatever blue is out here, adding some water to it so it can really move easily. And I'm going to make a line around where that middle is. Now it's going to look darker at first, but remember we're going to make the middle section a bit whiter than the bottom. So adding white over the top and allowing it to blend in a little bit. Okay, adding just white around. So we're making that second ball of snow. Don't worry if you go a little into the head because we'll redefine it in a moment. Okay, so do you see how adding that white, we're kind of starting to see it come into perspective where you can kind of see it looks like it's above the layer beneath it because the blue has added that shadow underneath. We've added depth, right? We've created depth. That is very cool. Adding more white to the edges helps it to be more defined from the bottom. So over on this side, it's not quite as defined. So I'm going to use some more white paint, which is going to fix that. Okay, adding some over here to break it up from the bottom. There we go. That's looking good. Little dabs to make it look like snow texture. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, very cool. I think I could put a little more over here. Very nice. A little more here too. The snow can look really good if you can see some of the shadowy bits through it so that it looks like the light is catching on some parts of the snow. It looks really cool. Okay. Oh, I'm loving that. Okay, now we want to redefine this head, right? So take a big glob of white and we are going to redefine the head. Make it nice and big. And then dab it a bit to give it some texture. The thicker you apply the paint, the longer it will take to dry. You want to work kind of fast before it dries too much. Okay. But there, we've got a head that looks like it's closer to us than the rest, right? Okay, so now while we wait for that head to dry, which is an important part, next what we want to do is just revisit the rest of the body and see, do we like how it looks? Do we want to add any more white parts? Maybe I want to add a little bit more white to some of the outside edges to give it a little bit of highlight, some little dabs of texture. You can do that if you want, or you can let it be, all right? So that's up to you. Going to add just a little bit. Remember to make sure you don't bring it in too close to the next layer because you want to keep those looking like separate circles. Now, with some white paint, take a small brush, something maybe like this, or even smaller if you'd like to, or the back of your brush. I think the back of the brush is kind of fun because you can make really cool circles with it. Get some paint on the back of the brush, and then let's just make some snowflakes. Now, if you use this sort of like a stamp and you just go straight down, then you can really get a great circle. You can press it all the way down to get a little bit bigger circle, or you can hold it a little bit above the paper and lift up to get a little bit smaller circle. So you see how that works? Be careful with the wet spots as you move down and move over. Just be conscious of where you've put your snowflakes so that you're not going to smear them. And you also don't want to smear this part. So if you want to let it dry a little bit more just to be safe, you can do that. Now you can add as many of these as you'd like. I think they're very fun. And if you're using your brush tip for it instead of the back of the brush, then you can just get your brush a little bit wet so you can get some white on there and then just dab it on wherever you would like snow. If your brush has a thinner tip, you can get a smaller snowflake. you can see how they have a little bit different look when you use the tip versus the back of the brush. Now, if you did use the back of your brush, make sure that you clean off that back end there. You don't want to accidentally make a mess. And clean out any brushes that you've used. Make sure you clean those out so that they are nice and clean and ready for the next time you want to use them. Now the next step is going to require all of this to be dry. So allow it to dry as long as it needs to, and then when we come back, we will be adding a face, a hat, a carrot nose, stick arms, maybe a scarf. This is really the creative part, so it's going to be up to you. If you want to give him a scarf, if you want to give him a hat, if you want to give him some other type of accessory, then that is up to you. So it's going to be your choice. Definitely bring some different colors of paint so that you have some options. Orange for the nose, if you want to make a carrot nose, is always a good choice. Brown for the stick arms, of course, and black for the coal eyes and smile if you make a smile, and the rest of the colors can be up to you. I think it's really fun to use red. I think red looks really nice with the blue and the white, so I'll probably use some red for the scarf, or maybe you want to use green, or maybe you want to use a dark blue or purple, so that's up to you. Think about what colors you might like to use, and we'll come back and finish it when it is all dry. Welcome back. I'm here with my dry painting. I'm going to be using black for the eyes of the snowman and the mouth and the buttons and who knows what else. I'm going to get a bit of black here. Keep it handy in case I need more. I'm going to use orange for the nose, which is a carrot. Set that over. I probably don't need quite that much. It might be a little too much orange. You don't need a whole lot, but get a little orange. And then I'm going to use red for the scarf. So I'm going to put a bit of red here. I've got my white nearby because I'm sure I'll use white again, but not quite yet. So for now, I just need these colors. Now let's build the face of the snowman. Because of the perspective, things might be a little bit different than what you would expect. I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet, and you can see I'm using a relatively small brush. This is because I'm going to make the eyes, and I want them to be like little coal eyes, like on a traditional snowman. Now this snowman is looking up to the sky, but we don't want to place the eyes higher in the head like we normally would when we see somebody directly looking across from us. The eyes usually appear to be higher in the head, even though they're closer to the center. But in this case, because the snowman is looking up and his body actually faces this way, we want those eyes to be lower in the head. So we want those eyes to be across the center line or a little bit lower. So I'm going to put these eyes here and here. So they're lower than what you would think. Now I'm going to make them a bit bigger and let them look a little bit lumpy because I just think that'll look cute, but that's up to you. If you want to make them big, small, lumpy, or real smooth. Just going to keep building until I like the size and they're even. Although, you know what? They don't have to be even. You can make them uneven. Wouldn't that be kind of funny, actually? Might be. Might be a little bit funny. I want big eyes, so I'm just growing them bigger. Okay, I like those eyes. Now, if you want a mouth, then we want to make a mouth too. The mouth is going to appear to be super close to the bottom here because of the perspective. So I'm going to make a little mouth. Making the mouth look like it's made of smaller little pieces of coal. Make them a little bigger to reduce the gap in between them. That's cute enough. All right, now I'm going to get as much paint off that brush as I can. And then I'm going to rinse off that brush really well because I don't want that paint sitting on there. Now grab a different brush for the carrot. I'm going to use this one that has a bit more of a point to it so that I can be a little bit more detailed. Get a little bit of water and dip into my orange here. Now when you think of a carrot nose, you probably think of creating a long triangle, right? But we have a different perspective here, right? So we're going to actually start by making the base of the carrot right there. Oh, that is so cute. Make sure that the paint of the carrot is nice and thick so that it looks like a carrot sticking on top of the snow. You don't want to be able to see through it. It should be nice and opaque. So the thing with acrylic paint is you can really build it up, which is fun. Added more to the middle, and I'm going to add even another glob right to the middle, and I'm going to let it just have a little bit of shape. Can you see? In the middle, it's got a little peak. I'm just going to leave that. So cute. Okay, now I'm going to take the tiniest amount of black, just a tiny bit. I'll even brush it off a little on my paper towel to make sure it's not too much. The tiniest bit of black. Now what we're going to do is just make a smiley face shape on the bottom of the carrot here. And then dab everything off that brush and then go back in and blend it a little bit toward the bottom. We're just adding a little shadow. Might look like a mustache actually. Does it look like a mustache? It does a little bit. But that's okay, we just blend it a little bit more. If it looks too much like a mustache, you can always add a little bit more orange paint to it and blend it in. But that provides a nice little shadow underneath the carrot. Make sure it stays that smiley face shape because that is what makes it look like a cone poking up. Now we're going to let that dry a little bit before we add any highlight or anything to it. So we'll leave that there. Now the red, I got the red out because I want to use the red for a scarf, for a hat, for whatever I feel like adding for clothing. So clothing will be the next step. So go ahead and clean out the carrot brush and the brush you used for the black parts. You can reuse those brushes if you'd like, or you can use a different brush. Make sure you clean them out before moving on. And I'm going to use this brush for the hat and the scarf. So the scarf, if you're going to do both, the scarf should probably be done first. so that the hat can appear to be on top of it. You want to think in terms of kind of what's on top of the other thing. Now, he will have stick arms, but we can add those later because if we want the scarf to obstruct the arm a little bit, then it's a bit easier to do the scarf first. So let's go ahead and make a scarf. I'm using red. You can use one color, you can use two. I'll probably add a second color to this, but I just am not quite sure yet. So I'm going to start with the red and see where it takes me. Dabbing off a bit of the paint because it was kind of a lot at first. That's a lot of paint. Okay, so for the scarf, I think it would look really cool kind of blowing in the breeze, right? So I'm going to have this scarf blowing to the back like this. Whee! My paint's getting a little dry on the end there, so it's looking a bit like crayon. I'm just going to get a little water on my brush, dab it in the paint, just let that paint be slightly more wet so it's easier to work with. Adding the other side of the scarf here. Now, this line might appear a little bit see-through. You can kind of see the snowman through it. And that's okay for right now because I can always go over it. But right now I'm making an outline. So the important thing is outlining where you want the scarf to go. So I've got one piece going that way and the other piece of it going this way. Now a scarf probably looks like long rectangles, right? Going out and away from the neck, blowing in the breeze. Now that I've got the outline, I can add some color in the middle. This red is a nice base. Being very careful around the head because I don't want the scarf to look like it's touching any part of the head. It is coming from under the head, right? It's coming from around the neck. So be very careful right there, although I am going to add a hat, I think. So if I do make any mistakes, my hat will probably cover my mistakes. Even if I do make mistakes that can't be covered, that's okay. I actually enjoy when I make mistakes in art because it helps me stay more creative. I notice that if everything always goes the way that I want it to, then there's really no room for creative thinking sometimes. All right, I'm adding thicker layers of the red. Okay, now I want to take a look at the scarf and see if I want to make any changes. And looking at it, I think it looks kind of skinny, so I'm actually going to make it thicker. And you can decide if you want to make any changes to yours or leave it how it is. There. Okay, I like the thickness of those. Next, a hat. Now, I'm going to make the hat red too. I'm going to make it all match. If you want to make a hat, then we want the hat to look like it is a little bit bigger than the snowman head. So I'm giving him a winter hat. He could also have a different kind of hat, right? So I guess that's up to you. But if he has a hat, it kind of go up and over his head. Think of it like a headband, because a hat is taller than the head, right? It lifts up and over the head like that. This looks like a headband or like earmuffs, and they'll come down a little bit like a slight rainbow shape. like that. It's very poofy and rounded on the outside. I'll give it a big poof on it too. Oh, it looks like a pirate right now. That is funny. I am going to give it a pattern, so he might look like a pirate. He might not. We'll find out. He's a pirate. That is so funny. Okay, I'm getting more red paint. And I'm going to make a big poof. Awesome. Okay, right now it really looks like the hat and the scarf are one and the same, right? So what we need to do here, add a little bit of black to some of whatever color you're using, if you have this problem, right? So if you're following along and making kind of the same design as me, then we need to make some darker red here. You only need a tiny bit of black. If you use too much, then you just have black. Okay, so I've made a deeper red by mixing some black in there. Cool. Then I'm going to try to get a very small detailed or pointed brush. Let's see, this one will do. Take that deep red and right along this line where the hat and the scarf are separating, I'm going to put this darker color. So this darker color is going off the edge of where the hat ends, which you can see here. Adding that darker color on the scarf side creates visual change from the hat to the scarf. Okay, and then we're going to add a highlight as well. But first, clean off that little bit of dark red. And then take a bit of white. Make sure your brush is totally cleaned off, or use a different brush, either way. Dip into that white a little bit, and then add on the hat side a very slight highlight, so that'll look like this. And it's okay, the red is still a bit wet, so it'll blend in and make it just a lighter, softer highlight there. Now, if there are other places that you want to add a white highlight, they might include this little part here, the top of the hat, this whole top area. I used a little bit too much, but that's okay. I'm just going to wipe off my brush and then smooth it in a bit more. Colors mix a little bit. That looks awesome. Going to add a bit of this onto this floof here. Top of the floof is a great spot if you've made a floofy hat. Make the top of it have that white highlight mixed in there. And this one I'm dabbing little dabs. Now this brush is a little bit pointy, so I'm actually going to use a different brush here. Let me clean off a different one because I don't want those little points. I really want more of a soft little dab. Nice. Okay, you see how that starts to really bring in a bit of dimension. Just added a little highlight, little shadow. Maybe you'd like to add a bit of a highlight also to this little fluff ball. It makes it look a little bit more rounded and poofy when you add a highlight to it, because when you think about it, if you're looking at a 3D object, you're going to, oh dear, if you get paint on your clothing, then take a little pause to clean it up. I'm back, good as new. When you clean up a mess right away when you notice it, you can usually take care of it and it's no big deal. If you're wondering what this is, it's actually a little desk vacuum. So what I was trying to demonstrate with it is that, see how it's rounded on the top? Well, a way that you can show on paper when something is meant to be 3D, like this, for example, rounded on the top, if you're seeing it from this perspective and you draw it on a piece of paper, it just looks like a circle. So how can you know that it is a circle that has a dome that comes up rather than a circle that's flat? How can you show that? Well, you need to show it with highlights. Highlights and shadows. So I've got an interesting light situation for my art here. So this, you can see 3 lights in it. But in general, to show something that is 3D in your art, you want to focus more on highlighting the part that sticks up the most and shadowing the part that is furthest away. That helps trick the eye into thinking that it is seeing 3 dimensions. So here's another example. You can see the highlight in the middle. There's more than one highlight in this example. But if we're going most simple possible choice, highlight in the middle and you can see shadows on the sides. That's how you can tell this is rounded and not just a flat rectangle, right? Because we are talking about building shape, that is why a highlight in the middle of that poof helps make it instantly look more fluffy, more real, more like it is a poof ball and not just a flat little clump. I'm going to add a bit more white to here. In the middle. Why in the middle? I'm making the middle look like it's poofed out closer to me as the viewer, right? If I would put this highlight on the outside edges and leave it dark in the middle, that wouldn't look right. In the middle, all right? I'm not adding highlight to the scarf because that scarf, I like it being further away. We are adding white highlights to things that we want to pull toward us to give roundness to. Now that the carrot nose is a little bit dry, I can add the highlight there too. So white highlight just to the top tip of the carrot nose. It looks a little bit too white right now. So I'm just going to add some little highlights in the eyes. Dot here, dot there. And then wipe off my brush. And then blend this out a little, making it more of like a little rainbow curve, but more centered than the bottom curve. Look at that, all of a sudden the nose, it almost is looking a bit more 3D. I've got a brown paint here. You don't need a whole lot for the arms because they are so skinny. A tiny bit of paint should do. I bet this is enough right here. A thin, detailed, or fine point brush will be great for the stick arms. And the stick arms come from the middle part of the body, right? Think about a snowman. And the arms don't come from the head, they don't come from the bottom, they come from the middle. And so we want them to come from the middle here. And when you think about sticks, are they straight, perfectly straight, or are they a little bit jagged? They're a little bit jagged, aren't they? Sometimes they could be a little bit thicker in some spots than others. Sometimes they can have little knots in them, little knobby parts. So I'm keeping it thin and somewhat straight-ish, but not perfectly straight. If it were perfectly straight, like with a ruler, that wouldn't look quite right. I'm going to give it a few little extra pieces on the end going out. Usually you find a stick that has these branch pieces branching off, and then you put the longer part in the snowman and you let that look like a hand. So it looks like little V's. But remember, if you look at this as sort of an arrow or a V, the pointy part points in toward the snowman. So you don't want to do it the other way, or it might look a bit funny. Other side over here. I find that when I've made a snowman, my sticks are never exactly the same as one another, right? It's not easy to find two identical sticks, so I want to make them look a little bit different from one another. Like that, right? Your sticks could look different. They could go a different direction. That's pretty cute, though. I like that. All right, I love the sticks. Now, I'm going to let the hat and the scarf dry, and then I think I'd like to add stripes to the scarf. I don't know yet if I want to add any detail to the hat or leave it the red. I kind of like it as just red, so I think I might leave it. I also see that I got some red paint down here. Oopsie, so that was a bit of a mistake. But I think what I can do is later I can just come in and put a few snowflakes over that and just kind of cover it up. That'll be fine. Or I could think creatively and maybe add something else to it. That might be cool too. But overall, I'm not worried about it. So now think about what else you might like to add. If you wanted to, you could put mittens over the ends of the sticks. You could add boots. Oh, you know, one more thing. I want to add some coal buttons because I have some black left here. Sometimes the decisions I make are really based on what paint I have left on my palette. I have some black, so might as well use it, right? I'm going to give them a button. And a button. And a button. Oh, now he's a proper lad. He's very cute. I'm back to work on this scarf, and I can see that I can see through the red a little bit still, but I have a lot of the red left on my palette, so I'm going to use it, and I'm going to make a thicker layer of red over my scarf so that it's not see-through. I'm being careful up here where I added the black because I want to keep that shadow in there. But if I lose it, I can always add it back in. I want to mostly add this extra red to this edge where I was seeing my snowman's body. Better. Just feather it out here so I can still see that black shadow. It still gives some separation between the hat. Looks great. Now I'm noticing that I think the red on the bottom of the hat here, closer to the snowman's eyes, I think it could have a bit of a shadow, and I've got this darker red that I made with the black. I've got some of that. So I'm just going to take some of that and add a bit of it under the white. I'm just adding the shadow, like when I was showing you how you can create the depth and the 3D quality by adding highlight and shadow. Just adding a little bit of a shadow there just to give it a little bit more weight. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry before I add my stripes. While I'm waiting for the scarf to dry, I'm going to add a few more of these little snowflakes around. And this time I'm adding some snowflakes that you can see on his body. Because if you think about it, when it's snowing, it would be snowing above him too. I am back again for some final details. The red part of my scarf is dry, so I'm going to take this brush. I want to make stripes, so I thought this flat brush would be really good for some stripes. I'm getting some white paint on the end. I might need more white paint, and I'm going to make some stripes. I do like how it looks a little bit uneven. It makes it look a bit more knitted, I think. So I do like that look instead of it being a solid white line. But I do need it to be a little bit more than what it is here. I realize now that I never made any separation between these two parts of the scarf. So they sort of are connected together like a V. So I'm going to show you how you can actually fix that if you've got that issue. I'm going to make this stripe just go to the end of this side of the scarf, and this stripe go just to there because I'm going to make it look like this one is on top of the other. Okay, see how that last stripe is a little bit faded? I think that looks good. It kind of looks like it's in a shadow. And then the final little detail that we need to do here, I just want to make a little bit of a shadow line to make it look like that one side of the scarf is separated from the other. This is a small detail. I need a pointy brush. That one will be fine. I'm getting my brush wet with some black. Okay, you can see the black is very wet. I don't want it too wet, so I'm going to dab it off a little bit. But I should have some nice, easy to move black paint. So if you can see the lines of the edge of this scarf, continue that line all the way to the hat. And then on the outside of it, there should be a small shadow that would go onto this scarf here. So following that line where it would be to here, that's where I want it to be. And now you can see it gives separation. So now it doesn't look like they're all one piece. That's much better. There you have it. I feel like mine is finished. Feel free to continue adding details to yours until you feel the same about your snowman. I had so much fun making this little guy today. Thank you for painting a bird's eye perspective snowman with me today. I had so much fun making this one, and I hope you did too. Remember to be proud of all of the art that you make and share it with your loved ones. I'll see you in the next one.